All right, looks like we're ready to go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 2021 full board meeting for Manhattan Community Board 4. My name is Lowell Kern. I'm the chair of the board. We are holding this meeting remotely pursuant to orders issued by the governor 14 months ago. And we are, one note before we start with our first presentation. If you want to speak during the public session, there was a sign up that closed at 5 o'clock. So if you want to speak during the public session, when the public session starts, when I turn this over to my first vice chair, Jeffrey LeFrancois, you have to raise your hand on the Zoom at that point in time. If you don't do it, then you will not have the opportunity to speak during the public session. But we're starting with a presentation tonight. We are getting a presentation, a very timely presentation on ranked choice voting from the New York City Campaign Finance Board. I'm going to turn the floor over to Ali Swatek, the Director of Policy and Research for CFB. Ali, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to join you as well. I have a few slides to share with you. I made an abridged version of the presentation and sent it over, and I believe Jesse will be screen sharing. Oh, perfect. All right, so I'm going to talk with you all very briefly about ranked choice voting in New York City and then make a pitch for a larger presentation we're doing with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer later next week, I believe. Next slide, please. So as the chair mentioned, my name is Ali Swatek. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the Campaign Finance Board. For those of you who don't know the Campaign Finance Board, we run the Public Matching Funds Program in New York. And we also are conducting a voter education and outreach campaign this year to introduce New Yorkers to ranked choice voting. Next slide. So just to jump right in, what is ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting is just a new way for voters to elect their representatives in New York. Voters can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference instead of choosing just one. And this gives voters more say in who wins. It increases candidate civility, and it can also lead to more diverse candidates winning elections. Next slide. We're not the first place to use ranked choice voting. It's actually used in 17 other US cities, including San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Santa Fe. So we're in good company here. And that's also how we know some of the benefits of ranked choice voting, the 3 of which I just mentioned. That's what these other cities that use ranked choice voting have found when they changed to using ranked choice voting from plurality single choice elections. The whole state of Maine uses ranked choice voting, which is kind of crazy. And also, people don't know this, but this is also how the Academy Awards selects their Best Picture winner. So lots of places are using ranked choice voting. It's very trendy right now. Next slide. For those of you who don't remember, all the way back in 2019, feels like it was 20 years ago. In 2019, the Charter Revision Commission created Ballot Question number 1, to establish ranked choice voting in primary and special elections for local office, effective January 1st, 2021. 74% of New York City voters voted yes on this ballot question. Next slide. To give you a sense of how broad the support was for ranked choice voting in New York City, this is a map of everywhere that voted yes on this ballot question. The places that are the darkest green are the places with the highest support. The places that are brown, this orange color kind of, they had lower levels of support. But I know I'm talking to mostly just a Manhattan audience. So next slide, please. To give you a sense of the support in Manhattan, on the west side here, we are looking at about 70 to 85% support. So folks were pretty supportive of using ranked choice voting over here. Not true of the whole city, but great to hear for here. If you're talking to folks about ranked choice voting, they may be more open to discussing it or learning more, and so that's great. Next slide. a really basic summary of what ranked choice voting is going to look like in New York City. So I already told you it's effective this year. That's why we've never used it before. Most of you probably didn't vote in the special elections that took place in Queens and the Bronx. There were 4 that happened earlier this year using ranked choice voting, but you may be eligible to vote in the primary in June if you're registered to a political party holding a primary. And we're going to use ranked choice voting only for city offices. And when I say that, I mean the offices of mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. We are not going to be using ranked choice voting in the general elections in November. And we're also not using it to elect any federal or state races. So it's really good to know that in Manhattan, when you vote for a district attorney, let's say you're a registered Democrat, you'll show up in June and you'll see the district attorney race is single choice, but you'll have ranked choice elections for mayor, public advocate, the 5 races that I just mentioned. So it's always good to know, and it will be on another side of the ballot. So you'll have to flip your ballot for that race. Next slide. The most basic piece of information that we like to tell everyone to make sure that they understand how ranked choice voting works is how do you fill out your ballot? So you'll note there is a different way that the ballot is set up. It's kind of a grid format, and the candidates are listed in rows. There are choices numbered in each of the columns. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, it's up to 5. So how do you fill out this ballot? First, you pick your first choice candidate and completely fill in the oval next to their name under the first column. If you have a second choice candidate, fill in the oval next to their name under the second column. If you have a third choice candidate, fill in the oval next to their name in the third column. I think you see where I'm going with this. You can rank up to 5 candidates, but you can still choose to vote for just one if you prefer. It's up to you. The word choice is in ranked choice voting, so it's the choice of the voter to rank up to 5 if they prefer. Next slide. If you take anything away from this presentation about how to mark your ballot, please note that you should not overvote. This is a very important ballot marking error that everyone should be aware of. And that's when you give multiple candidates the same rank. If you can see on the slide here, I have the sample voter voted candidate B and candidate C as rank 1. Basically, when you put this into the ballot scanner, it's like telling the machine that you're trying to go left and right at the same time. It doesn't know what you're saying. So don't do this. If you do this, it won't be clear who you intended to vote for, and it could invalidate your ballot. The good news is that the ballot scanner is smart enough to see this and kick it back out. But I know absentee voting has been very popular in Manhattan especially. So for those of you who are voting by absentee, don't do this. Again, don't vote for 2 candidates for the same rank. Next slide. The second ballot marking error that I will highlight is called duplicate ranking. And this is for folks who want to maybe vote for just one candidate and submit their ballot. They don't want to rank any other candidates. So duplicate ranking is when a voter marks one candidate for all of the ranks. So you can see here, this voter has marked candidate B as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Don't do this. If you want to just vote for candidate B and submit your ballot, just fill in the oval next to their name in the first column, and you can submit your ballot that way. Although we do encourage you to utilize the rankings because you don't get the full benefit of a ranked choice ballot if you don't rank different candidates for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th place. Next slide. Of course, the reason why that is because ranked choice voting encourages you to rank other candidates on your ballot in case your first choice candidate is eliminated. And why does that matter? Well, if a candidate receives more than 50% of first choice votes after all the votes are collected and tallied by the Board of Elections, they're the winner outright. However, if no candidate earns more than 50% of first choice votes, counting continues in rounds. And that's why it's important to have different candidates marked for your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th choice and not just rank one candidate. Next slide. The counting process continues thusly, and this is a very simplified version of this. So at the end of each round, the candidate with the fewest votes will be eliminated. If you voted for that candidate who's eliminated, your vote moves to the next highest ranked candidate on your ballot. That's why you want to rank a different candidate for second and a different candidate for third, fourth, and fifth, so that your vote can stay active as long as possible. The rounds continue this way until there are 2 candidates left, and the candidate with the most votes wins. For those of you who have voted in primary elections before, you may be familiar with runoff elections where you come back and have to vote for one of the 2 top vote getters. This is kind of simulating that process just in one round of elections. That way you don't have to come back again 2 weeks later and vote again. Next slide. All right, we're getting towards the end of this presentation. These are the important election dates for June. And again, you have to be registered to the political party that's holding the primary in June in order to vote for it. The last day to register to vote is May 28th. Early voting starts on June 12th and it lasts for 9 days. The last day is Sunday, June 20th. And then, of course, if you're requesting your absentee ballot, we're encouraging you to do that right now. You can go to nycabsentee.com and request your absentee ballot literally right now if you want to. And the last day to do that is June 15th. And then, of course, primary election day itself is on June 22nd. Next slide, please. Okay, if you're looking for more voting resources, you can find English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Bengali language resources at voting.nyc. If you use social media, you should follow us at NYC Votes. Next slide, please. And if you thought that I didn't give enough information, that's because this was a very abbreviated presentation. We'll be giving a full training with, in partnership with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer on Monday, May 10th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Any questions that you may have about using ranked choice voting will be answered here. I believe the information has already been distributed to you folks, but if you're interested in attending that, you can RSVP using the link that's on the screen, and I believe that you'll also get an email blast about it. Next slide. I think that's probably my last one. Yep. So if you're interested in learning more and contacting me, this is my contact information. And that's about the end of my very short presentation.
Does anyone on the board have questions for Allie? Sweet, go ahead.
Thanks, Lowell. A couple of questions. You said that ranked choice voting is trendy. So do you know, like, it started this decade or, you know?
It's actually been in use in some form for about 100 years, but San Francisco's been using it since 2002, I want to say. So it's kind of having a resurgence in the US right now, I would say.
Okay. And it was brought to my attention that Manhattan DA is not ranked choice voting. You have to choose only one.
Correct.
Are there any other candidates that we need to know about? Like, do we need to know about any other candidates that have the same thing?
So it depends on your political party. So there's district leader races, there's judgeships. I think the best way to remember it is that you're only going to use ranked choice voting for those 5 city offices that I just listed out: the mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council in your district.
Okay. And just for those people who couldn't write as quickly as you said it, it was NYC absentee ballot, all one word?
It's nycabsentee.com.
Okay. Not .org, .com?
Yep, .com.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dale, go ahead.
Thank you, Allie. I'm in the process of doing some voter education on this topic, so this was very timely and helpful. It's true that you also, your agency runs the debates, organizes the debates, is that right? And you have some information about the debates, like when they're scheduled and who's hosting them, which media companies are hosting them.
Yes, I can share a link out to more information with the staff, but I will just note that the first debate is on May 13th. It's the mayoral Democratic primary debate. And I believe it's on New York One. They're also required by law to live stream it for free. So you don't need to have a cable subscription. You can go to newyork1.com for that. And the Republican mayoral debate is, the first one is May 26th.
Thanks. And also the most comprehensive source of information I've seen about the 51 city council races this year is the city did a very comprehensive spread with like all the races and all the candidates. So I recommend that for people who are interested in getting information about city council races around the city.
Yeah, they've been doing an amazing job of putting out information. For those of you who like the mail, we will be mailing you a voter guide the first week of June that includes little pieces of information about each candidate that's running in all of the races, personalized for you and your district.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ally? The board? From the public? Thank you very much, Ally. We appreciate your time.
You got it. Thank you.
All right. We have a public hearing on a land use application for the Windermere. JD, you going to host this public hearing?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
The Windermere is a landmark building on 9th Avenue and 57th Street. It was built in about 1882. It's got quite a history. It's quite a wonderful building. The owner of the building came before the Land Use Committee requesting some waivers so they could convert, restore the building into either a hotel or commercial use. The building also, because of past harassment, has what is called a cure, which means 20% of the building will be affordable apartments, affordable AMI under 80%. And so the committee heard the applicant and the owner and recommended approval of the waivers with conditions about certain things. The owner responded very quickly, trying to meet all of our requests. So it's a good relationship developing, and we hope we can solve all the issues that we have.
Is anyone, I don't believe anyone was signed up to speak at this public hearing.
No one has signed up. No one has signed up to speak at this public hearing currently.
Okay, is there anyone from the public who wants to?
In that case, Mr. Chair, I would declare the hearing over.
Okay, nobody responded from the public, where the hearing is closed. We now go to our public session. As I stated at the outset, if you have not signed up and want to speak, raise your hand now. If you don't, you will not be allowed to speak. Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy Wednesday. As is our standard practice, it's the public session. Members of the public are invited to speak for 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes on any topic of their choosing this evening. I'm not seeing any hands raised right now. And I do want to say that I only have two public speakers signed up this evening. So if we could bring over Lisa Wager and Mr. Brian Reber, two regulars, as we know well. And Jesse, I'm seeing Caitlin Irvin with a hand up in the participants as well. So folks, again, 2 minutes. I'll give a 15-second warning, though I have to say with two folks speaking, I am inclined to recognize we have regulars with us tonight. And we'll give it till 6:55 in case anybody else wants to raise their hand to speak at the public session. So without further ado, Lisa Wager, are you with us?
I am, and I want to take my extra 17 seconds to say that your hair looks especially fierce tonight, Mr. LeFrancois.
Thank you. A fresh cut for spring was in order on Monday. So
it is evident, sir. It's been spruced up, sort of highline. Anyway, okay. My name is Lisa Wager. I'm the Director of Government and Community Relations at the Fashion Institute of Technology, the SUNY College on 27th Street between 7th and 8th. I'm here to tell you about a few fun things that have happened at the college and some upcoming opportunities to participate. FIT has won a third consecutive award from the National Endowment for the Arts, the NEA. This one is for $25,000 for STEAM education to support sustainable programming at the college through 2021. The proposal is called Unconventional Innovation, New Design for a Sustainable Future, and it funds 3 related programs. In partnership with High School for the Fashion Industries, Judith, in the district on 24th Street, FIT will run 3 workshops for high school students. That's going to happen this fall. The NEA funds will also support a seminar at the college about the interconnectivity of the global fashion industry, also happening this fall. And the third beneficiary was our 15th annual Sustainable Business and Design Conference, which happened last month. We have a few end of the year events coming up. Our annual School of Art and Design graduating student exhibition will go up online on Monday, May 10th. The exhibition presents a juried, award-winning, and thesis project work of more than 500 student graduates in 16 areas of study. So you can dip in and out and pick what you feel like looking at. The areas include toy design. We have the only public bachelor's in the nation, interior design, footwear and accessories design, packaging design, which is so imaginative, jewelry design, beautiful, animation, interactive media, and game design, and of course, fashion design. And along with showcasing the students' truly amazing work, the GSE showcases the strength of FIT's educational model, which is integrating practice in industry with theory and teaching in the studio this year, often in our remote studios. And finally, the always hotly anticipated FIT Bachelor Degree Fashion Design Runway Show will go up on Monday, May 17th. This show gets international media attention every year, and this year, you can have a front row seat from your couch. You can find both of these on the FIT website, which is fitnyc.edu. Thank you. Happy spring.
Thanks, Lisa. You too. Good to see you. Next up, Brian Weber.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Sure, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good to see everyone. My goal is not to appear in the public meeting next month, but while I'm here, Jeffrey, your hair does look fantastic. Hi, everyone. As Jeffrey said, my name is Brian Weber. I'm here this evening to speak on behalf of Midtown South Precinct Community Council. The NYPD's Chief of Community Affairs tasked Midtown South Precinct with forming a new precinct community council. Serge Hartnett and myself will be serving as the interim co-presidents. The first meeting of the newly constituted council was held last week on April 27th. Going forward, we'll be holding meetings the 4th Tuesday of every month, currently via Zoom. And I'll be sharing that link in advance with Jesse and the board. Just so everyone knows, Midtown South Precinct service area covers 29th through 45th Street, 9th Avenue to Lexington. And as I'm sure the board well knows already, but maybe the public doesn't, community councils are a part of the city's charter and serve as a public forum for community to ask their local precinct questions and address ongoing concerns regarding issues of public safety and quality of life within the prescribed precinct service area. Our meetings should be routinely attended by our precinct's commanding officer, as well as our community affair officers in Midtown South. That would be, the commanding officer would be Deputy Inspector Robert O'Hare, who spoke before the board before, and community affairs officers Burns and officers Kelly. Our meetings are open to the public and open to all, and I hope to see many, if not all of you there. And please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have. I don't think I can access the chat or the Q&A, so Jesse, if you're able to, you can drop my email address into the chat for
Will do so.
board members. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian. And 2:01 on the time there. Nicely done. Next up is Caitlin Irvin and then Jen Malacott, please. And
Great.
that is it. I don't see any other hands. So Caitlin, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm hoping my name is Caitlin Irvin. I am a staff representative with the New York State Nurses Association. And I work specifically with Mount Sinai West, which is in Community Board 4's district. We wanted to come to you. We don't have a lot of time tonight. Hopefully we can spend more time possibly with the health committee, but we wanted to tell you about the addictions unit on Mount Sinai West, a very important unit that provides medical detox services to your community, has been closed since January under the guise of COVID second surge, but we don't really see it that way. Anyhow, what we know is that the unit needs to reopen. The nurses who work there are very committed to the unit. The patients need this service. And we have been asking management to reopen this unit. They've reopened all of the other ones that were closed. And we're very concerned that this psych unit remains closed. Vontel, are you on the phone? Because I have a nurse, I believe, who's here, who I think would be much better at speaking to this. I don't know if you're able to pull her in. It's Vontel Dozier. I think she called in.
I do see the name up, but I mean, this sounds like something that would be better to be taken up at committee. So if you just want to give us the summary, and then you'd connect with Jesse and the community board, and it would go before our Health, Housing, and Human Services Committee, if you're looking for some kind of support.
Yeah, so I thought maybe we could do it together here. So what we're ultimately looking for is support in getting this, this unit reopened and these services back to the community. We're drafting letters, so maybe it would be a letter from the community board or a resolution.
Yep.
My colleagues are better at sort of explaining that. I know that the nurses on the unit are very concerned about the patients, and we know that substance abuse is only getting worse during this incredibly difficult time.
So let me tell you thank you, first of all, for bringing this to our attention.
Yeah.
It's something near and dear to the hearts of this community. The process to get it through the community board is exactly what you're doing, raising it at our public session. And then you'll touch base with the community board staff. Jesse Bodine is our district manager, and we can get it on one of our committee agendas. From there can be a presentation. The committee will ask questions, deliberate, discuss, take comments from the public, and then draft a letter. And then the full board would have the opportunity to vote on that letter, and we could, send it to whatever entity you would request us send that letter to.
Awesome, that sounds great. And Vontel, if you can hear me and you are on the phone, I think you can sign up directly to speak if I missed anything important. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Caitlin. We really appreciate it. Next up, our final speaker for the night, Jen Malacott. Jen?
Hi. I did not sign up because I've been in and out of the hospital for a week. At negative result at NYU. I love how you set the ground rules beforehand to be sure that you controlled me this meeting, but I haven't had time to be involved in these things because I had a negative reaction to the COVID vaccine. I've just come from getting a CAT scan. I have bruises all over me. So that's what's going on with me for the past week. So I didn't have time for all this. And I'm actually realizing that, my life is a little bit more important than this. But I would like to say, I think it's very interesting that the Midtown South Community Council has been usurped because as we all know, John Mudd runs the Midtown South Community Council, and I'm just finding out about this now. I was on the community council meeting this week and found it very interesting that the police department wasn't there and that Brian Weber wasn't there. So I kind of figured something was up. I don't know how this process works, but it really doesn't. I mean, you're the living example of people working together to solve problems, right? With the community, and having two community councils giving different messages or representing the same group of people. And I realize that many people think that I'm not part of that group, but I travel into that area frequently. I've worked in that area for many years. And so it is the issues that are going there are my concern, as well as my concerns in Chelsea. So I'd really like somebody to give an explanation as to how that happened and when and if John was going to be informed about that.
Thanks, Jen. The community board is not responsible for the NYPD precinct councils, so it may be something you have to take up directly with the council or this new group, but it's not an entity that we have the ability to speak for. But certainly, we appreciate your reaction.
You have influence. You have influence and opinion, and you have relationships and connections, and I'm sure all of you knew that this was going on.
Jen, you know our typical process because you're a part of almost all of our committee meetings. If there's an issue that we need to be made aware of, it gets brought to our attention via the appropriate committee. The committee then deliberates, discusses, and potentially drafts a letter, at which point it's delivered to the full board for consideration, more discussion, and a vote. So if this is something that you or the community feels needs to wend its way through our process, I think, as always, we're happy to figure out how to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you're on the mend. I'm sorry you had a negative reaction.
It's crazy. I mean, I had bruises that you wouldn't believe all over my legs. I've had
Thank you, Jen.
today.
With that, Mr. Chair, I declare the public session closed, and I might note for the record, this may be our shortest on Zoom record of public sessions. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. The process seems to be working to have people sign up in advance. So we're going to keep going with that.
Yep.
All right. We have to adopt the agenda, and I believe I have 2 agenda item changes that I need to announce before we adopt the agenda. Item number 17 from the Business Licensing and Permits Committee has been referred back to committee. And we are adding a new item number 26 from the Transportation Committee. With that, are there any questions on the agenda? Bert? You're on mute, sir.
It's postponed.
Okay.
We prefer to use that term rather than refer back to committee.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that, Bert.
Move to adopt as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Anyone present not eligible or otherwise not voting? All right, the agenda is adopted. Are there any questions about last month's minutes?
Let me mention, Lowell, there was a typo caught by Twee, one of those rare typos that creeps in. So I changed it,
Okay.
and that's done.
All right. Are there any questions about the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Any second? Thank you, Dale. All those in favor of adopting last month's minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone present not eligible or otherwise not voting? All right, the minutes are adopted. We are setting a land speed record here tonight. Next on the agenda would be our borough president, but I don't see her.
Brian's here.
Brian is here. We don't get Gail tonight?
No, she'll be coming. I will let her know to come ASAP, but she is scheduled to be here.
Okay, then we will hold Gail and go to our local elected officials. And the first person I see on the screen is our state senator, Brad Hoylman. Senator Hoylman, the floor is yours.
Nice to see you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone. Quick few updates. The first is on the Empire Station complex, which I think folks, certainly this community board, along with Community Board 5, have been attempting to weigh in with a working group. Today, I introduced legislation along with the Assembly member, Dick Gottfried, called the Empire Station Complex Public Review Act. Our legislation is going to require all applicable land use decisions related to this project be subject to our ULURP process, the same process that all city agencies must adhere to when acquiring property and citing capital projects. As I think many of you know, the governor is proposing demolition of full city blocks and creating 10 buildings, 8 of them at least super tall under the guise of the transportation plan. I voted against the portion of the budget that allocated $1.3 billion of your tax dollars to fund this real estate project. And it's going to require the state to follow our local land use procedures and give the community board, both 4 and 5, a voice in this process. So more to follow, but that was submitted today. I wanted to also let you know that Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal and I had a town hall with Peter Marks a couple of weeks ago. Peter Marks is the gatekeeper for the FDA on vaccines. He literally is the final sign off on whether vaccines were approved or not. My biggest takeaway from that town hall was that according to his information, the vaccines work against all the variants. Every variant that we've seen, the vaccines are effective against them. So that's really good news. Obviously, that's the moving target, but so far, so good. Third, I sent a letter along with one of my colleagues and 10 of our Senate colleagues to the management of the Met, urging them to come to the negotiating table with the backstage union workers. There is a lockout currently at the Met, and I'm standing along with those workers and musicians who make that institution what it is. Fourth, I introduced a bill that was passed in the Senate that would require state agency websites to provide translation into the top 12 languages spoken by New York State residents. It seems like a no-brainer, but the state websites are far behind the city ones. This is obviously very important as it pertains to COVID. Fifth, the eviction moratorium that we passed earlier this session was extended for both evictions and foreclosures until August 31st. And we need to get to the public as soon as possible how we're going to distribute the $2.4 billion that we approved in the budget for the COVID-19 Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This program is going to provide up to 12 months of rental and utility arrears assistance for income eligible renters as well as commercial tenants. And another bill I passed through committee is important for our neighborhood. We call it the Manhattan Mom and Pop Tax Relief Act. It passed through the city's committee. This bill is going to suspend collection of a very unfair tax on our small businesses called the commercial rent tax. The tax is only applied to businesses south of 96th Street in Manhattan. It's been repealed everywhere else throughout the city, but it remains in Manhattan. I'm trying to get it repealed in at least during the COVID-19 period, but we want to repeal it overall. And then finally, there's some budget updates. I haven't spoken to you since we passed the budget. Some really great things. I want to congratulate all my state colleagues for their work. But one that I'm particularly happy about is the money that we got for our public schools to finally fulfill that lawsuit called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, the one that Senator Robert Jackson had been fighting for years, even before he became a senator. It provides the largest state-funded school aid increase of $3.1 billion, including $1.4 billion for foundation aid. And then another initiative, which I was proud to lead in the Senate, is that we are doubling the New York City musical and theatrical production tax credit from $50 million, what the governor proposed, to $100 million, as I proposed in my legislation. And we're creating an $800 million small business recovery grant program to assist small businesses affected by the lockdowns. If the state ordered these businesses to close, our argument was they shouldn't, have to pay. The state should be providing them a subsidy. Again, the challenge, Lowell, is going to be to get that money out the door. We've also passed a $25 million restaurant resiliency grant program and $35 million for a restaurant return to work tax credit. There's a lot more in my report. I want to shout out Maya Burlow, who's an amazing colleague. She recently got promoted in my office. She could be running the whole show. Who knows how soon? She does such a great job. Thank you, everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Hoylman? I've got one. What's Maya's new title?
She's Deputy Chief of Staff.
Okay. I am seeing a hand from Representative Carolyn Maloney, but I don't know if she's just volunteering to speak next or she's got a question for you, Brad. But seeing no other questions.
Volunteering to speak.
All right, I'm going to go to Representative Maloney then. Thank you, Brad.
Good to see you, Carolyn.
Good to see you, Brad. You've been busy. Lots of good things
You have
happen.
been busy. Thank you for all the federal money.
Oh, God, I know. I just seeing how it's being spent to help people is just so exciting. Last week was exciting too. I was one of a few guests invited to attend President Biden's joint address to Congress. There were very few of us in the chamber, but his message was deep and strong. I'm so thrilled we have a president and that he was able to deliver 1.9 trillion to our country in the American Rescue Plan. Most importantly, he focused first of all on vaccinations. He had promised to have 100 million people vaccinated in the first 100 days. He surpassed that to 220 million. And by the end of May, we are going to have enough doses to vaccinate everyone. We're doing these pop-up vaccination centers, and we also funded not only hospitals as centers, but the community health centers. And I can put up on my website the community health centers that have been funded for vaccination sites. If there's a site that Community Board 4 would like within your boundaries, let me and my office know, and we can work to bring a pop-up for a day or two to address people in that neighborhood. The economy's picking up. We have a 6.4 GDP. It's the highest it's been since I've been in office. It's usually around the 3% rate. So that's really good news on the economy. And the American Rescue Plan, I was honored to chair the committee that oversaw $255 billion that went to cities and states, and we made it flexible. And it was one of the areas that the Democrats and Republicans fought the most. The Republicans didn't want to give any money to cities and states. Well, who coordinates this response to help people in the communities? And when you combine everything with the direct grants, the unemployment subsidy, the money for the MTA for the small businesses, the PPP grants, and the helping renters stay in their home, the rental relief, and everything else, it comes out to roughly 100 billion to New York State alone for all of our needs. Coming up next is the American Jobs Plan, which is the infrastructure that needs repair. Everybody always talks about it. We hope to be able to deliver it and get it passed. And also the American Families Plan, which invests in our kids and our families. Both are especially exciting and important to me since I've spent my entire career fighting for families and for critical infrastructure investment. I am relieved that we finally have a president who understands the importance of both and how critical they are to our cities and nation's recovery. The American Families Plan is a once-in-a-generation investment in the foundations of middle-class prosperity, education, healthcare, and childcare. And beyond helping families, this plan powers the innovation and growth of tomorrow through expansion in quality education and childcare. I have never seen so much money in my life go into education. It's very thrilling. I'm a former teacher, and just billions are going into our city, our state, across the country. And it will provide for the first time, and we're using the federal money to do this, the free pre-K for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. A pre-K for 3-year-olds is coming directly out of that money. It will be for every public school, every child in Manhattan, throughout all 5 boroughs. Everyone will be receiving this access and expansion of education. And scientists and educators say there's no greater investment in helping young people stay in school and thrive. The jobs plan, in it, I am pushing for an extension of the 2nd Avenue subway up to 125th Street. Eventually all the way down, I hope, but this funding, $3 billion in that, and allocations for the East Side access that is connecting the LIR into Grand Central. There'll be a lot of modernization and upgrades in Grand Central. And I'm pushing also a project that I think would be tremendous for the economic growth of our city, and that's high-speed rail between New York and Boston. The MTA owns a lot of the lines connecting, so it wouldn't be that expensive. We are organizing a coalition of legislators from Boston, from Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey to be part of a coalition, and I'm pretty confident that we will get major funding for it. I believe this is an issue of importance to all of you, and that's the helicopters. And I am trying to pass legislation and push into this package a bill that I've been working on for years that would prohibit non-essential helicopter flight over New York City airspace with exemptions for emergencies and security and so forth. Tomorrow I'm chairing a hearing on Black maternal health. Black women are 3 times more likely than white women to die in childbirth. And we have a slew of initiatives and ideas of how to address this and make it not happen. And next week, I'm chairing a hearing on oversight on January 6th. And we'll have 2 major former Trump appointees testifying as we try to piece together what happened. 5 chairmen, including myself, have written letters for all kinds of documents throughout the government to piece together how this horrible incident happened. And the next day after that hearing, I'm having a hearing on the post office and trying to address the financial problems that they're confronting. If they're not addressed, we could lose our post office system. So I think it's a very important bill that I'm working on. I'm really.
Carolyn, do you have time for a question? You got a question, and I think it was that last point. Maria, go ahead.
Hi, actually, thank you, Lowell. It's actually not a question. I was just going to share that one of the letters, I'm the co-chair of Housing, Health, and Human Services, and the letter that's coming out of our committee that I'm going to be discussing this evening is actually about maternal mortality and morbidity. So I just wanted to share that. That might be interesting for you to take a look at. It's on our website.
Okay, I will look at it, and you should touch base with this. Alma Adams and Lauren Underwood founded a task force in Congress 2 years ago. And unlike many caucuses and task forces which just discuss ideas, they've come out with a package of bills, roughly 13 bills called the Momnibus.
Yes, so that's in our letter, actually.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So we're going to be working together. We can share that. Are there any other questions? It's just exciting to have a Democratic House and Senate and President. We were able to pass one great bill for our city and state. Hopefully we can get the other 2 bills through and repair our infrastructure and help our families. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Maloney. Appreciate your being here with us. I'm going to go next. I have, who's here? Emily is here. Emily Bartisic is here from Assemblymember Rosenthal's office. Emily, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you everyone. Good evening. I'll give a warning. I've been having a lot of connectivity issues during this meeting, so please let me know if I freeze, and I'll keep it brief on updates. First, I have an event to promote. On Sunday, May 23rd, our office is having a Shred Day event with Senator Serrano. It's going to be in front of our district office on 72nd Street. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The community board should have that flyer to share, and we hope you join if you have any papers to shred. And then a few community updates. Our office has begun receiving an influx of calls again about unemployment issues. The DOL has put out a lot of mixed and confusing messaging about who needed to reapply at the end of their benefit year. And so we've been hearing from a lot of constituents that their benefits paused around March, where they just haven't been getting any new funds pushed out, and their accounts need to be sort of reset by the Department of Labor, asking to correct these issues and better streamline the renewal process, unemployed due to the pandemic. We also recently wrote a letter to Con Edison, we learned about a building where tenants have been without gas since October. There's been a gas repair that needs to be done, but Con Ed has been charging constituents $30 a month for a service fee. It seems they have a policy to do this if somebody's without gas, but their account service fee. So we think that policy is absurd. It's not the fault of the tenants if their gas line is out. So we wrote a letter to Con Ed asking for all impacted tenants to be refunded and for that policy to be eliminated. I think I'll stop there. I know Senator Hillman gave a lot of the legislative updates that we've been working on. So if anyone has any questions, please reach out to my office, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. And you are having internet connection issues still, I'll tell you that. Finally, in terms of representatives of public officials, we have Philip Ellison from Public Advocate Jemani Williams' office. Philip, you still with us? He was. Brian, where are we with Gail?
I'm here.
Oh, she's here.
Voila.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of important things that are going on. Number one, I know that the senior centers, we have had 2 press conferences, and for some reason, the mayor will not open the senior centers. I can't tell you how important they are to the seniors. I think you know. We had 1 press conference, we expected 2 seniors and 40 showed up. And we did another one and 60 showed up. And they're literally pulling up their chairs outside the senior centers to be able to talk to each other. So I hope the mayor understands we have gyms that are open, we have restaurants and coffee shops, and we have museums. And we can go to the movies. But these, in my opinion, very well run, particularly in Board 4, still can't open. So I don't know if there's more that you can do to help us, but we're not giving up. We had almost every single center, people were outside clamoring to get in. So that's number one. Number two, I do think that Brian has worked with you and with Jesse on the issue of trying to figure out public safety in Community Board 4. I know there's a lot of discussion about John Mudd and who's, participating in these discussions, but the bottom line is that we have to do more. I don't know when the hotels are leaving. I've heard no information from Department of Homeless Services. So all I can say is we will keep working. The mayor's idea of bringing in the Business District Recovery Initiative, you know better than I whether it will work, but I have to say when I heard it announced, I heard the word Business Improvement District and police. I did not hear the word community board. And so that was upsetting to me because it seems to me that you should be first in line to have that kind of discussion. So we did write a letter to NYPD and the mayor stating that as you move towards these initiatives, I can't think of a better way to do it. Involve the local stakeholders and community boards being one. So I don't know what's gonna happen on that. And I got some nasty emails, nasty pushback on Facebook saying, we love the cop scale, so leave them alone. Well, what I'm saying is they would do a better job if you had some input into it. That's what I was saying. And I want to thank everybody on the board who's been involved. I've been to so many, I'm afraid, in Board 4 press conferences because Asians have been attacked. Obviously, the big one was on 43rd Street, but now another one in front of Manhattan Plaza. I've been to East Harlem twice, and I don't know how many times in Chinatown. I don't know what kind of mental illness, what kind of hate campaign these individuals who are doing this think they're part of. I don't understand it. I do think one thing, and we're advocating, is that the groups that are working in the Asian community do need to be funded to make sure that they have, the support they need on this topic. Because literally, and there are people on the community board who know this, people are afraid. My friends are afraid to go out the door, and the seniors are particularly afraid to walk out the door. So they need help. In Chinatown, lots of young people, plus some security firms who are donating their time, are walking the streets. The other thing I want to mention is we're also working with sending a letter to the Port Authority, working with the hotels right in that area, because I know that's something that you're sort of following up on what we said. Board 5 and you are working closely with the Empire, the area around Penn Station. I have to congratulate you between what happened in Albany and the, I would say the more extensive discussion is incredibly important. So congratulations, we all supported each other on that. And I think the governor's office listened. One of the topics, very small, there are so many topics to deal with, but one of them is open space. That whole project has this tiny little pocket park in terms of open space, and they just need a whole lot more. You'll come up with many, many other ideas that need to be discussed. On the storefronts, I know that we have an endless discussion about storefronts. There are a lot of empties. We're waiting to get the data. Helen Rosenthal in the city council and I do have a bill that we introduced. It's somewhat, it's also based on mediation, quite different terms of the bill that's been pending for the last 30 years. So I just want to let you know that that's something that we're focused on. Every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, we have this meeting that some of you participate in to go between the vaccine issue and the opening issue, how Manhattan should open. And the most recently, we talked about the stores and the restaurants that I think you're quite aware of and some of the issues that they face. One of them is an interesting one. In addition to all the storefront issues and the times that are coming up and who could be at what percentage and the hours that I think you're briefed on, the SLA for the stores, I'm not saying it's the right thing, but something to think about. It takes 6 months for the SLA to agree to the liquor license. And this is a controversial topic, I know, but I think it would be worth figuring out what that time frame is, because it is, if you ask the stores, the restaurants, what is a big issue? The issue would be to have the community board be in front of it in terms of when and if you should get a license. But the fact that it takes so long once it has been agreed to by the community board or not makes no sense. So I just want to bring that up as something that you might want to get clarification on from the state liquor authority. So those are just some of the issues. We are working with the high school graduations and outdoor space. We gave them the Intrepid, to their credit, is doing a lot of high school graduations. Every park is trying to do them. The schools have got to have in person. It's just not able. You can't, particularly as kids who come from families that never had a graduation, to do it on Zoom is horrible. So we're trying really hard. We know that everybody's concerned about the ranked choice, and on Tuesday the 11th at 6:30, like other groups, we are doing how ranked choice actually works. So thank you very much, Board 4. You work incredibly hard. The problems are incredibly challenging, and I know you're figuring them out. Thank you.
All right, Gail, I have a question, and then I'm going to go to Chris LeBron. My question is, when do you have a time frame for new appointments to the community board yet?
It's a good question. We'll have them definitely by June, for sure. We're almost done with all of them. I'm sorry to be so slow. It's just a little bit on the not having the same in-person access, but we will have them done by June.
Okay, understood. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, everybody. Hello, Borough President Brewer. It's nice to see you. This question is in relation to your announcement about outdoor high school graduations. CDC announced and medical professionals announced that we may not hit herd immunity throughout the United States, which means that New York City can end in a long-term endemic, COVID endemic. I'm wondering whether or not these outdoor graduations will have accessibility for maybe a Johnson & Johnson shot, or a promotion of why it's important to be vaccinated to those who are attending.
It's a very good question, Chris. I know that in each case, there's limitations on the number of people, depending if you're in, the playground, you're at the Intrepid, they're following the guidelines. But I would assume, but I don't know for sure, we're going to have that most of the staff has been vaccinated because they're DOE folks, but I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. Let me follow up.
Thank you, Gail. So the next question would be more to have educational information for the family members and students in attendance, since all 3 vaccines are now being approved for emergency use under 16.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Borough President.
Any other questions for Gail? All right, thank you, Gail. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to give Philip one more shout out since he's here.
Hey, everyone.
There you are.
I'm here. I'm listening. I'm just here participating and listening. The majority of our office in the public advocate is paying attention to the reopening and the governor's announcements and trying to make sure we're continuing to be cautious. But I'm really here to just pay attention to what's going on in CB4.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Does anyone have any questions for the Public Advocate's Office? Okay, then we are going to move on. I think that covers all of our elected officials who are here. And I'm going to go to my district manager, our district manager, Jesse Bodine, for his report.
Hi, good evening, everybody. You can hear me, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, great. I'm Jesse Bodine, the district manager for Community Board 4. I'll be very brief. So the board staff has begun returning to the office this week. We will not be taking walk-ins at this point. We continue to be reachable by phone and email. We can set up Zoom meetings, virtual site visits. We can set up in-person site visits for anything that comes along that way. We're doing that currently with our liquor license applications, and we'll be doing we can be setting up in-person site visits for other quality of life issues. The board office has been receiving a lot of inquiries about the key parks and the Astro Dog Run. As the district office begins its reopening process, we'll be scheduling a time either on a weekly basis or maybe every 2 weeks with a date and time for key pickups and things along those lines. The office is working currently and in discussions with the organizations that manage those, both the key parks and the dog run, and we'll hope to have a firm reopening date shortly, and we'll make sure everybody knows about it and access is made available. For May committee updates for the public and for board members, fortunately, all committees meet at their regular date and time this month. So what normally happens should happen. And that is it.
Thank you, Jesse. Any questions for Jesse? All right, you're off the hook, my friend. All right, chair report. We have 3 different major projects that are being handled by working groups, and the working groups all met this past month. One, which Senator Hoylman referred to, is the Empire Station Complex Working Group. Our Port Authority Bus Terminal Group continues to move forward. And now we are working on what is called High Line East, which is the extension of the High Line from its current terminus at 30th and 10th on the east side, going and taking that all the way over to Manhattan West. In terms of small meetings, members of exec and the transportation committee met with Senator Hoylman about the heliport, and the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee restarted meetings with the owners of 317, 319 West 35th Street, HPD and DOB regarding illegal demo issues. And the only other thing I want to mention this month, because I did ask Gail about new board appointees. We do have a couple of members. We have 4 members who are not reapplying, and I just wanted to call them out and thank them for their years of service. Martin Treat, who was feted last month with his proclamation. Brian Sokal, Brett Furfer, and Judith Dayhill will all be leaving us. And this is probably their last meeting if Gail has everyone appointed by June. So I wanted to thank the 4 of you for your service and your efforts. And that's the quietest round of applause I've ever heard. The mute button works. And I'm going to take us into our business session then. And I'm going to start with the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee and Jean Daniel Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our first item is the Windermere. Is that correct, Jesse?
Yes, it is.
Okay, the Windermere, as you know, is a landmark building up on 57th and 9th. Historic building. They're renovating the storefronts. They want to renovate inside, make it a hotel or commercial. They're leaving their options open. There is a cure component of affordable housing because there was a terrible history of violent harassment which led to the Clinton cure, which maybe Joe can explain a little because it's rather an important part of our history. They seem, that is the owner seems to meet our concerns of the committee. So we're trying to work those through. The only thing I would say that was important to note, one of the residents who was harassed out in the 1980s came to the meeting, attended our meeting last week, and she thought the renovations were going well. And it's just a testament to the resolve of this Hell's Kitchen community to see things through. So this magnificent building will be restored to its former glory. So the board should be proud of that. I think Joe has some concerns about the letter.
So first on the issue of the harassment, just so for newer members of the board to understand, this building along with 500 West 42nd Street was the scene of the most violent harassment in our district. People were threatened with guns. They were threatened with hot irons put in their faces. They left to work and came back and found their doors removed and their apartment cement locked, and had to have the police come with sledgehammers to get back in. And in one instance, when this was being discussed at our land use committee, the managing agent came packing a gun. It's the only case where the owners, the two owners, husband and wife, and the managing agent were criminally convicted and actually did jail time for harassment. So it's pretty remarkable story. And then the building was sold to a number of people, ended up in the hands of a Japanese company, which attempted to figure out what to do and spent decades, almost 2 decades before it was sold to the current owners. On a letter, we should just have to note that our language has changed a little bit. It should say it's approval with conditions to make very clear these are our conditions. And the 2 items that we must be very specific about are broadening the age range for the cure. That's consistent with our original resolution on the cure about 4 or 5 years ago. And the second one is the thing that was surprising to us. The ADA access for the residential portion of the building involves taking a lift down to the cellar and coming in through the cellar of the building. So we're recommending that there be an entrance at grade, so both people who need accessible entry or are not disabled can come in the same location like in most buildings. Will require permission of the Landmarks Commission. Just going to clarify that. Otherwise, this letter is fantastic.
Thanks, Joe. Will do. Good edits. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this letter? Because JD, you got a second one.
There's 3 of us right now.
Okay, Bert, Jeffrey, then Bert, then Tina.
Thanks, Lowell. Great letter, JD and the committee. 2 points. I know this will be made available to go commercial or hotel. Did the applicant incline greater one way or the other when they came before you, or it was very much straight-faced, it's going to be one or the other?
Jeffrey, my feeling is they just want to keep their options open, and it's going to depend on the economic climate.
Okay. And then I was really pleased to see that the affordable housing was for seniors. So I want to disagree with my good colleague, Mr. Restuccia, on this. We don't have an opportunity to build specific senior affordable housing. And I thought this was a great aspect of the development and really saw it tied to the cure itself, given that maybe there's some folks who were booted out then that are seniors now that could even find their way back in to really bring it full circle. But I really applaud the fact that it was senior affordable housing, which is very hard to do, as we've seen take place in other parts of Manhattan.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think the thinking was, the rationale was, the people who lived in the building who were harassed out of the building were of many ages. And so it seemed correct and fair to restore that variety of ages. But your point is well taken.
Bert?
Yeah, I think good work on the letter. A horrible story. This may be, if there's a happy ending, this might be a happy ending after 30 years? How many years? Whatever it is. Question I have is about the roof. The letter says, the committee says, we don't want a rooftop restaurant. I think that's the way I read it. We don't want a rooftop restaurant. And then the response of the owner is, oh, we're going to have one and we'll just adhere to community boards, parameters of how do you operate a rooftop restaurant? How do you respond to that?
That's why we made conditions.
Bert, it's a good point. I'll let Joe speak. I hope the letter's not confusing. We're not opposed to a rooftop restaurant. We're opposed to outside the restaurant use on the roof outside of the restaurant, because there are buildings, residential buildings nearby will drive people crazy, and we've had that history. But ultimately, it will come to your committee and have to be resolved. But the land use committee made a statement that we're okay with a restaurant on the roof, but not outside use.
Oh, that wasn't clear. Thank you.
We can modify that slightly, Bert, to make it clearer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Bert.
Tina?
Thank you. That was a great job. And I was just wondering, to sort of honor the past, if we could do outreach to the artist community, specifically women artists, as a way to honor the past and, reach out and to people that really have a hard time making ends meet and providing housing for themselves.
Well, one thing, and I think it was James Wallace brought up a point there. We should commemorate the fact that this was a building for women artists and a precursor to Greenwich Village, the art scene, if you will. So there was kind of commemoration in the lobby or somewhere of that history. I'm not sure about reaching out to artists. You mean for the affordable apartments?
Yeah, for the affordable apartments, exactly. Sort of like, there is Westbeth, of course, which is famous for the work it does. But I just was wondering, maybe not putting in this letter, but for future discussion. Not a big deal.
It's a good point, Joe. I'll let Joe speak to that, the housing component. I think there will be a community preference in the lottery for the apartments. Is that correct, Joe?
Yeah, I think, Tina, we could just put in some verbiage saying, especially too, in terms of the outreach being done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James?
Yeah, I want to, first of all, great letter. And I hate to sit here and pander to the crowd, but it's literally one of the best letters I've seen written out of this community board. And I love the personal touch of discussing the individual impact, because it really humanizes, that these are real problems that face real people. I wanted to sort of echo and piggyback off of what Tina said and what Dale said, or excuse me, I think it was, I can't remember, and it's late and I haven't eaten. But anyway, the idea of maybe having the owners make an effort to reach out to artists, but also those who were run out of the building. I think that would, bring this full circle. If not, shifting it to the elderly, I'm sorry, Joe, is that already being done?
All of the people who were harassed out of the building have permanent homes and are quite settled where they are. And I know that because in essence, Clinton Housing took most of them. So they are now in their apartments for 25 and 30 years. So there's a real sense of place. And part of their trauma has been letting go. And we dealt with a lot of folks on that issue. It was a very violent time that they kind of want to put past them, James.
Totally makes sense. Thank you.
I think, James, you're trying to write a screenplay, and this would be the ending you're looking for, I think.
No, it's, but I'm just so proud to be a part of this board.
Great. Thanks, James. Is that it, Lowell?
Right. Any other questions on this letter?
Yeah, I'm
you have a
sorry.
second letter, though.
I'm sorry, I have to go back to this.
On,
If I'm completely alone on
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
this senior housing factor, again, we saw the Little Italy community get torn apart over the fight to build senior affordable housing on what is today called Elizabeth Street Garden, and that's going to become senior housing. I can't think of a recent senior-specific affordable housing development in Community District 4. Dare I say in the past decade, many of our communities are NORCs. And so historically, we should say that everybody should move in young and nobody should ever move in when they're old. But when you think about the location, it's fantastic to consider for senior housing. And again, maybe I'm alone on this, but I think this is a real distinct opportunity to build affordable housing for seniors as a part of the cure. And if I like to look around at my colleagues on the board, but I would offer an amendment to ensure that stays that way in this letter.
I want to speak to that very specifically. It came to the Housing Committee like 4 or 5 years ago, this process. And it was very clear the reason for senior housing is because the developer did not want a broader range of families. And the sponsor they chose was a specific sponsor that is a Jewish organization. And I will tell you, it was very deliberate, it was very specific, and it felt very discriminatory. And that's what the Housing Committee reacted to. So the fact that this building was a diverse range of people of incomes and backgrounds, it was felt this should not be senior housing, but people who lost their homes came from all different size households. And that's the reason, Jeffrey, not in an abstract way, but in a very personal community way, that the community board took that position at that time and supported again at this time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess, like I said, we do not have opportunities that come along very often for senior specific affordable housing. And yet, as we know, we have a significantly substandard housing stock in the district with tenements across Hell's Kitchen, walk-ups in Chelsea, many of which seniors call home. And we are often trying to find ways to move them out of that substandard housing into permanent, good housing. So, I appreciate the need to consider the diverse population that was in 1983. But the district is quite different today.
The district has not changed much in this diversity.
No, it hasn't, but it certainly has in its housing stock and availability of housing, and the fact that we can build housing for seniors, and we're sort of pushing that aside when it is a significant fight.
My last word on this is a cure for harassment. People were physically and violently harassed out, and the broadest range of people should have the opportunity to get back in. It should not be tailored to the developer's desire.
I mean, I guess by that logic, every single building that is refurbished or redeveloped, it should reflect the exact original tenants, in terms of the makeup from when they moved in. I'm not going to keep going on this, but I worry about the precedent this sets.
I don't think it's a precedent, Jeffrey, honestly. It's about a cure for harassment, and there's been 4 in 40 years, 4.
Senior housing could still be part of the cure. So thank you.
I think, Jeffrey, you raise an excellent point, and we certainly should consider that more. We also want more families. So sometimes it's a conflict between getting both in. I don't even, so anyway, that was the recommendation from the committee. But you raise a good point.
Paddy?
I support the committee's recommendation for a range of ages, but I just wanted to point out, particularly for Jeffrey, that in Chelsea, we're having a new building at the corner of 24th and 8th that is going to have a % of only senior citizen housing. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Glad to hear it.
Is it my turn?
Go ahead, Maria.
I just wanted to ask Joe something for clarity. Joe, I heard you say it's been I think you said 4 cures of harassment in 40 years. But if you could just elaborate on that. I'm a little confused. I don't understand how that's related to.
Yeah, the cure for harassment only applies to buildings and where there has been a finding of harassment by HPD after an investigative and judicial process. When there's a finding of harassment, then in order to lift it, you must apply for a cure, providing 28% of the floor area of the building or 20% of the floor area of the whole development site, whichever is larger. There have been very few instances where it has risen to that level of a finding. And they are 500 West 42nd Street, 300 West 46th Street, this building, the Windermere, and West 23rd Street and 11th Avenue, and 307 West 43rd Street, which was the Globe Hotel on 44th Street. That was a larger development site. So that's actually, that's 5, only 4 have been approved so far. And therefore, this provision has only been invoked in the most desperate and violent cases that there's been an actual finding by HPD of harassment.
Yeah, but I'm confused about what that has to do with whether it's a broad range, a broad age range, or seniors.
In every case, there has never been when people have been harassed out of a building, there's never been a limitation on a demographic that can come back in. All of those had a broad range. There has never been it is a specific type of thing at all. It's always been general population, because the general population of Community Board 4 was harassed.
I'm having a little bit of a connection issue here. So JD, can you just manage this the rest of the way?
I'm sorry, Lowell, did you say JD?
Yeah, I asked you, since this is his committee, I was asking him to run this the rest of the way because my connection is cutting in and out. Chris has his hand up next, though.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to commend the committee on this letter. When I was growing up, that building was called the Vampire Landlords Building, or the Landlord of Blood Building. You know, I heard terrible stories about it. My mom and Joe Restuccia worked in the neighborhood, you know, for a long time on that. As it relates to senior housing, I just wanted to ask Joe as co-chair of housing and JD as co-chair of land use, whether or not we have made any headway on any other potential state or city developments where we can focus on a portion being devoted to senior housing, because walk-ups are not conducive. Boomers are aging out of the affordable housing lot that they found themselves in the mid-late 70s and early 80s. And I just want to make sure that that need is filled, you know, within Hell's Kitchen in Chelsea. And thank you, Betty, for informing us about the allocation of senior housing at that location as well. That's all.
Chris, we have 23 units of senior housing for LGBT seniors coming to Hartley House. And
That's right.
45 units of senior housing coming to 500 West 52nd Street.
Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate your work.
All right. I think we should wrap up this letter. Is there anything else on this letter?
Just so everybody knows I'm voting in favor.
All right.
I'm not going to oppose it based on this. I mean, I was just hoping we could. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, that trouble, Jeffrey.
All right. There's a second letter from this committee about the Landmarks Preservation Committee. JD?
Yes, I just want to say one more thing about the Windermere. The Windermere, this board pushed to get it landmarked. The great Ed Kirkland, who was a member of this committee for many years, was the forefront of that. Also, I have to point out, I should have mentioned it earlier, Walter Mankoff, who was chair of the board, passed away last week, and he was a great chair during not only Hudson Yards, but many other things. So we lost a member this year. He should be he should be commemorated for all the work he did for this board. The second letter, I'm going to let Joe talk about this. Joe and Bob Benfato, who's on the committee as a public of the Hell's Kitchen Alliance, responded to LPC Landmarks Preservation Commission, their rejection of our proposal for the pushcart market down on 9th Avenue, formerly known as Paddy's Market. We wanted it landmarked, and they said they didn't find sufficient cause to landmark it. We are going to respond to that. Bob and Joe wrote the letter. There was also a third letter, which comes from the Chelsea committee, but we'll get into that later. But Joe, you and Bob worked on the response to LPC.
Yeah, we're gonna, so first, the context of this is that a major commitment as part of the Garment Center rezoning was to specifically work to establish a historic district in Hell's Kitchen. That was one of the few things we achieved as part of this. And the Landmarks Commission has taken forever to respond, over a year and a half. Is it, Jesse, is it a year and a half or 2 years they didn't respond?
It's over a year.
Yeah, over a year after we met with them. The response was basically just, we really don't care. Now this letter, we're gonna make it a little bit stronger, but the idea that we have a specific commitment that was an agreement between the Speaker's office and the Mayor's office done in a public meeting as part of the Garment Center rezoning, and the response comes back literally 2 years later. There's nothing of worth except for a small area when the evidence shows to the contrary. We're going to beef it up a little bit more to say that this is not the way to go. And we're returning to the Speaker's office really to sit down with Landmarks to deal with this.
Any questions? Okay, then I'm going to move on. Next committee is ACES. Alan or Kit?
I think Kit's going to take this.
Okay.
Please here.
Sorry, everybody. Hold on for 1 second. We are in between bedtime number 1 and bedtime number 2. And that is Khan Academy kids in the background. So this letter, first of all, thank you to Alan, Josephine, and Katie, who helped to edit and substantially improve the content here. Is our summary of what we learned at the forum we hosted on the DOE's recent changes to their admission policies. Most importantly, a 1-year pause that focused on a variety of things, but we discussed most at the forum was middle school admissions. Hearing from experts, hearing from community members, including folks on our board. We landed at 2 recommendations, which are at the top of the letter. Number 1, the DOE should engage the community in a dialogue about how admissions policies should be changed permanently. And specifically, the old policies should not be reinstated. The second recommendation was that the DOE should do more to communicate clearly, proactively, and comprehensively to the folks that policy changes affect. Because one of the big things that we heard at the forum, give me 2 seconds, baby girl, was that folks were still confused and did not yet have enough information. 3 things to flag. There were a couple of late stage changes. On page number 3, the first full paragraph, we tightened up the last sentence to clarify that there's been multiple parents from the parent community who have voiced support for a combined approach of academic screens and policy design to intentionally increase integration. On page number 4, the last full paragraph in the middle, we reordered the way we talk about the data we collected through live survey during the forum to lead with what the majority of folks indicated they would like to see, which is some of the policies eliminated permanently and others being reinstated. And then finally, on the last page, number 5, the first paragraph of the conclusion, we added a clause at the end asking to asking the DOE to make sure that they share the data about how integration efforts around New York City are impacting enrollment patterns publicly.
I need a special treat.
My daughter needs a special treat, so I'm going to go off video, but we'll take questions.
Any questions? I think you're off the hook there, Kit. BLP is up next.
Lowell, Chris had his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, did you have a question for Kit?
I did, just briefly as it relates to gifted and talented. I was reading recently that a portion of gifted and talented students, if they have an older sibling in a G&T program, they would be considered without recommendation from like whatever. It's like a ridiculous clause. I was just wondering what are the racial repercussions in terms of eliminating a seat for one of our BIPOC students in public school with a rule like this?
Are you asking about the rules that got paused or the gifted and talented rules specifically? Because this letter focuses on middle school academic screens, Chris.
I'm sorry. I thought they were both one and the same. I apologize. I'll yield. And I can talk about this offline with you. Thank you.
Okay. Carrie.
Okay.
No, not yet. Carrie, we've still got other questions. Carrie?
Just really briefly, thank you for this letter. I have a 8th grader who applied to high school this year, so that was fun. I'm just trying to understand the idea, just to restate what I think you said. This is, the recommendation is for more transparency, a little more community involvement, a lot more diversity overall, with that being the goal. And that we should not just reinstate what we used to do, but also not do what we did this year, correct? So it's kind of like, we need to sort of
way of explaining it than I do. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a bit like we need a whole overhaul. Okay, thank you for this. It's true. Thank you.
James?
Yeah, first I want to thank everybody for the hard work on this letter. It was really extensively researched. I just want to wrap my head around some of the use of language, especially in the conclusion and maybe throughout the letter. And again, this is not an issue that I've been, deeply involved with in the last few years, but, just thinking back to my, high school social studies, when I think of the words segregation and integration, they harken back to a time in the 50s and 60s, and for instance, in the sentence, let me just, in page 5, in the conclusion, while we acknowledge that segregation in schools is challenging to address, we believe it can and must be solved without diminishing quality, et cetera. I mean, there's an implication, again, I think it diminishes the historical fact of segregation that was a policy, a law, as opposed to the unintended consequences that need to be addressed in increasing diversity. Because then later in that same paragraph, it says, this process should happen in conversation with parents, community members, local and national experts on school integration. Again, the efforts in the 60s to integrate schools were, National Guard, state police. It was a big deal, and to conflate those two, I think, it makes it muddy for me. Am I missing something? And if this is the language people are using, I accept it.
Quickly, James, I'm sure I speak for everyone. I say we don't want to in any way diminish the work of folks who are involved in the civil rights movement and their efforts. It's a common misconception that schools are more integrated now than they were before the civil rights movement. They're actually more segregated in general at a high level across America, but also in places like New York City. There are more extreme separations of populations than there were in the 60s.
I totally hear you, and I'm not denying the facts of what you said. It's just the term segregation has a specific historic meaning, and it implies an intentional separation as opposed to a lack of diversity, which is what it sounds like we're trying to address.
Do you have a suggestion?
While we acknowledge that a lack of diversity in schools is challenging to address, it's, you know, segregation implies an intentional policy of separating races, which that's just not what's happening.
I'm not sure everyone would agree with you on that, but I do think it's a interesting point. Many folks might say that there have been very intentional policies that have gotten us to the place where we are today. Let me think on it. I see a lot of other hands.
Can I make a language suggestion? Just to say de facto segregation for the current circumstance, as opposed to segregation historically.
I would agree with that.
It feels like a healthy middle ground. Thank you for that suggestion, Dale, and thanks for raising it, James. We can make that change.
Thanks, Dale.
Josephine.
I just, wanted to confirm that that is the language that's being used. I mean, segregation and integration, those words are currently being used. The system really hasn't changed much in 50 years. I totally agree that during the civil rights era, it was a different issue, but the end result is the same, is that these screens, they continue to perpetuate the same segregated schools that we saw in the 1950s. So I'm not opposed to using the word de facto. I think it's fine, but there are, a lot of people who believe that these practices are intentional. But I just wanted to share a story, because we didn't really have time to put demographics in here. And, the letter would have been super long anyway, but in our District 2 schools, for example, in the middle schools are so segregated that the middle school that my daughter went to had one African-American boy in the entire middle school. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, one child was African-American. And overall in District 2 schools, African-Americans only represent about 7% of the population, but you can understand what the issue is. And at the same school was about 76% white. So we do have a ways to go. There are a lot of things happening, but I do feel that enough went into this letter to just sort of clarify that, we do want to see some change. And, we had a great forum, and I'm really happy with the poll results. And so that's basically what the letter was based on, was what families wanted to see. So thank you.
Katie?
Thanks. I was going to say something partly similar to the beginning of what Josephine said, in that this is very much the language that's being used by everyone who's discussing the very large challenges facing the public schools right now, that it is questions about segregation, and that it is worse than it was decades ago. And so I think it's important for us not to feel like somehow that language isn't correct, even though we're not equating it with the exact same things that were happening, back in the 60s, but it is very much factually in existence today.
That's what de facto means.
But yeah, so I guess we can go with de facto, but yeah, we just have to be very aware of sort of that is exactly what's happening today. And then I think, yeah, I'm just really grateful that we were able to have this forum, and that there are so many people sort of paying attention to this issue right now. And because it is seriously a huge challenge facing all of New York City. It's not even, certainly not just the schools that have academic screens, it's all of our schools are very segregated. And it's an issue that we all need to be paying attention to. So I'm glad that we were able to do this forum, and we have the support of the whole board. Thanks.
Les?
Yeah, I want to commend the people who wrote this. This is a fantastic letter. I think it reflects the reality of today. This is the reality of where we are today in 2021, unfortunately.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, I want to support the use of de facto because I lived through that era, and it's a word that was used, and it has good impact, you know? I am the oldest person at this meeting tonight. And to add to what Josephine said about her daughter, let me tell you that from grammar school right through law school, I never had a single African-American person in class with me, okay? I considered this in hindsight over the years, and I must tell you, it is a harmful state of affairs when you have to look back at age 50 or 60 and say, you know, geez, I never once, not once, sat next to someone who was not of my own race, okay? It is a very harmful state of affairs. So I'm just happy for this letter, okay? Bit of history. I'm now a part of history, and you're hearing it. Thanks.
Okay, I think that does it for this letter. I'm going to go to BLP next.
Okay, BLP, we intended originally to bundle items 4 through 16 and discuss item 17, but item 17 has been postponed till next month. So we're just going to bundle items 4 through 16.
All right.
Any questions?
Anyone have questions on any of the BLP matters?
I have a question. The vote sheet does not have a spot for postponed. How should we call it? Should we say sent back to committee even though we're changing it, you know, in written form?
There should be
withdrawn or postponed or whatever.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mike. I'm not looking at the vote sheet right now. If you know, if the wording matters, rather than not being sent back to committee, you can do. You can be. There should be tabled.
Tabled, yes.
Fine. You know, is the equivalent of postponed in this situation.
All right, that's there, tabled.
Okay.
There's also withdrawn. If you want to do withdrawn.
Are there any questions or any other questions on the BLP letters?
Yes, correction. What was the item that we're tabling here at this point?
17, the last one.
17.
I got you,
Okay,
Les.
thank you. 17, thank you.
All right, Les, go ahead.
It says sent back to committee. Isn't that what we're doing?
Marty, it's a wording. We thought it was. I thought it was going back to committee, but we're calling it something else. So it's withdrawn or you can do withdrawn or tabled. Either way, no one's voting on it, yes or no today.
Right, that's the effective. Let's forget about what we're calling it. Effectively, We're not voting on it today. Perhaps we're going to vote on it next month. Let's not spend time on what we're calling it.
All right. Les had a question.
I just have a quick question about item 15 for clarification as to whether or not boxers will be operating on the rooftop. Will there be bar space? Will it be open space?
You mean
yeah.
On the new location, the 52nd Street location?
Yes. Will they be using the rooftop?
No, there's no outdoor space has ever been used there, and they did not ask to use any.
Good. Thank you.
They are operating in their old space.
Yes, but the question is because the way that building is set up, there is a rooftop, and that sound travels throughout the community if they're on the rooftop.
They're not there.
Good.
On that, then the new space.
Perfect.
And they're not going to call it Washington Heights.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Transportation's up next.
Hi, everyone. We have 6 letters on the agenda. 2 of them already were considered by exec because unfortunately they concern a pedestrian fatality in front of Time Warner Center. And we wanted to address the issues to both the Time Warner Center and to the DOB because it involved sightline obstructions of a sidewalk shed in front of a garage. So those letters are for ratification. The other letters concern 18 concerns a loading zone areas in front of London Terrace building. A letter to the meatpacking bid in support of the closure of the 9th Avenue slip lane. There are a couple of friendly amendments to that letter in which we will request a language to request an impact study on the 9th Avenue traffic loads and also request a right-hand turn lane. And also on 22, there's some friendly amendment language that came from from Tishman about their spiral sidewalk treatments, which is to say that they are, first of all, it has to go to the DCP instead of DOT. And second of all, they are generally in favor of considering a open street for Hudson Boulevard, but they don't want to come out in this letter, and they don't want us coming out in this letter and saying they outright support it. So we're going to make those changes. And letter 23 is a letter to the electeds about sidewalk conditions on the basis of the survey that we circulated, which had a high rate of response. Oh, Lowell, should I talk about 26 or we'll do that as new business?
We'll do that as new business.
Okay.
All right, any questions on 18 through 23? Bert, go ahead.
Bert.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. The changes on 23rd and 24th Street on the loading zone, what was the origins?
The residents of London Terrace had trouble with their deliveries and especially with their moves.
You say it came from the Tenants Association or the Co-op Board or the management?
That's interesting, right? Because the building is partially tenant.
That's what I'm asking.
And partially co-op. And we believe at this point, having gone through some correspondence, that everybody in the building is pulling in the same direction on this and wants to have loading zones on 23rd and 24th Street. But yes, good question, because initially it was presented by one entity and we sort of went back to them and said, we need to have buy-in on all the concerned parties since this is a multi-system building.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Anyone else with Paddy?
The letters are fine. I just wanted to ask, 22 and 23 don't say the usual introduction that the community board voted and, blah, blah, blah. So these are kinds of letters that don't require that.
That could have just been a drafting oversight.
Dale, we can add that language in.
Yeah, I think it would be added once upon approval. Sorry to not have it in the original draft.
Okay, so that's, I just thought maybe they were unique or something.
No, I think it was really just it was an omission in the draft. Like, we tend to get to the meat of it and then add that stuff in later, and we just neglected to do it this month.
And for 23, I thought that DOT and sanitation should be addressed, the letter should be addressed to them or copied because they seem to be players. I thought that the letter could be stronger if it said up front that there needs to be sort of a clarification of who does what when and which agencies, and that they need to kind of make it clear how they're going to cooperate with each other. I mean, it comes out in the questions, but I just thought that was like a main point of the letter.
Right. I see your point. And I think there was some, and I understand we're sort of saying, look, this is a mess. Like, how are we going to make it better? Let me just open it real quick because I believe it is supposed to be CC to those two agencies.
Well, it's to Deputy Mayor of Operations.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. We had this discussion and it was determined that to start with the Deputy Mayor of Operations because of their oversight role in the different departments that would be involved, and especially since we're asking a lot about how those agencies are expected to coordinate when their roles with respect to sidewalk maintenance and clearance is so balkanized in a way. So we thought it would be best to start with, after a lot of discussion of this, we thought it would be best to start with the Deputy Mayor of Operations.
Okay, that makes sense. Maybe you could copy the letter to sanitation and DOT, and maybe you could put something in the first or second paragraph to focus it on the need for coordination and clarification. I think that's like a big takeaway from this.
Yeah, I believe there is language about that. We can move it up.
Okay,
That's
all. It's no big deal.
All right, I'll take a look at that, Betty, but I would consider what you're suggesting friendly.
Yes.
As always.
Katie.
Well, it's very similar to what Betty was saying. It's specifically about the letter about, I mean, it's
23.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do think if you can sort of move up, or even just maybe say at the beginning, like we have some very specific questions that we would like responses to, instead of, just like, oh, here's everything we've learned. And then only at the bottom do you figure out what it is you're asking, which is answers to those questions.
Right.
So I think it would just be helpful. And yeah, and frankly, I think it would be great, the stronger the language you can make it, the better. I mean, I think it's awesome you got so many responses to the survey, but it's clear that there are real problems. And if we can, I won't be surprised if at some point in the future, after the responses to this, that we have to ask for even more to be done or to be changed, because it doesn't seem like a workable system.
Right.
But anyway, so I would just suggest, and again, very friendly, to maybe
so if I'm pulling from what you're saying, Katie, and what you're saying, Betty, there's language in one paragraph that says like assess the coordination, like we furthermore call, and I feel like you're suggesting that goes up top and not as a furthermore, but as a central ask.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, maybe even ratchet it up a little.
Yeah, and strengthen the language a bit. I'm completely on board with that.
Okay,
awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for the suggestions.
All right, I think that does it for the transportation letters. Housing, Health, and Human Services. Maria, I assume you're going to take this one.
I am. Thank you, Lowell. So like I mentioned earlier, after Carolyn Maloney was speaking about that we are talking about, well, I'll just say at the last meeting, we had a physician from Department of Health and Mental Hygiene come and speak to us. She's currently working on a project that's related to severe maternal morbidity. Maternal morbidity is when women experience a severe life-threatening complication while pregnant or during delivery or after childbirth. And it's usually a result of like a blood transfusion, blood clots, kidney failure, stroke, etc. And maternal mortality is when a woman dies as a result of the pregnancy, during the pregnancy, during delivery, or up to a year after childbirth. And it usually occurs from specific conditions like cardiomyopathy, hemorrhage, or infection. And there are a few other conditions. And something that is interesting is that maternal death is actually considered just the tip of the iceberg. Maternal morbidity is actually the greater issue. And so I just want to, if you did not get a chance to read the letter, and I know that there's a lot, I just want to highlight three things that I think are really significant from the letter, and then mention what our asks are or what we're supporting, what committee is supporting. So first, in the United States, the the highest rates of both mortality and morbidity. We have the highest rates of any developed nation. And in the past few decades, the rates in our country have actually increased. And as recent as of 2018, New York City had the highest rate of severe maternal morbidity in the entire state. The second significant thing is that Black women have the highest rates of both mortality and morbidity compared to white women. And that's true for New York City, the state, the country. And in New York City, Black women are 8 times more likely to die than white women. And Latinas are 3 times more likely. Even more astonishing is when you're considering a college degree, healthy weight, private health insurance. These factors don't change risk levels for Black women. In other words, Black women are still at a greater risk. And the third thing that I think is significant in the letter is that several sources provide the reasons for this disparity and attribute it to often preventable medical issues, implicit bias, and racism in institutional policies and practices. Based on the presentation and the consultation with Dr. Murthy, the physician from DOH-MH, what we decided we would be supporting is first, expanding Medicaid coverage for a longer period postpartum that was actually introduced by Gottfried. I actually have to put that footnote in the letter. I forgot to do that. Second, increase funding to expand the visiting nurse programs for expectant first-time mothers. The third, City Council to pass a package to increase access to doulas, midwives, and support for midwifery birthing centers. And then the last thing was Dr. Murthy mentioned that because of the impact that the federal bills could have on New York City, that that those were really going to be significant for New York City. And so we noted support for 2 pieces of legislation that are actually co-sponsored by NADLR. One of them is the Momnibus bill that she mentioned, that Carolyn Maloney mentioned. And that is it. So are there questions, comments, any friendly amendments?
Patty has her hand up.
Yeah, I can't see. Sorry. My screen is really like 2 inches.
Go ahead, Patty.
I basically just wanted, I mean, I was at the meeting and heard that presentation too. I want to congratulate you on this well-researched letter. And
oh, I'm sorry, Betty. Sorry to interrupt you. I forgot to mention who helped me with the letter was Josephine. She helped significantly. So a lot of those footnotes you see there, it was Josephine and I who did the letter.
Anyway, I congratulate you and Josephine on doing this well-researched letter. It seems very well put together and focused, and I hope some of these bills will have an effect, because I thought the findings were very shocking.
Yeah. Thank you. If you did see the letter, there was no one. It wasn't specifically addressed to anyone, but I think it needs to be addressed to Nadler, Gottfried, and Speaker Johnson.
And Maloney.
Does anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Let me just, that's true. Thank you.
I'd also CC Helen Rosenthal. She's the chair of the Women's Committee in City Council.
I'm sorry, Betty, or was it Paul Devlin? You're saying you think it should be addressed to Maloney or CC'd?
I was suggesting CC just because she talked about it tonight.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. Yes, CCing her. Where did I put my notes? Okay. And then I didn't hear, Chris, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I think it should be CC'd to Helen Rosenthal at City Council, since she is the co-chair of the Women's Caucus with Carolina Rivera, and she also chairs a committee on women's health and wellness.
Yeah, she does. I think we are CCing her.
Right.
Thank you for the reminder.
All right.
Anyone else? I don't know if anyone else has a hand up.
No, I don't see anything else, Maria.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, next up, there's a letter from exec about zoning waivers. I'm going to ask Paul Devlin to present this one.
You're asking me to do this one?
Well, it's either going to be you or Betty or JD, and I picked you.
Terrific. All right, let me pull it up. I actually thought it was going to be Joe, so that's why I apologize.
All right, Joe, you want to present this letter?
I can do it quickly, I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
And
then.
everyone's going to add in. So we have, this is work in about 2 months by 2 land use committees and a lot of research done by a lot of volunteers and committee members. The broad issue is the conversion of hotels and Class B and C office space by number of bills proposed and funding mechanisms by the city and state. And specifically, there is currently $100 million in the state budget that has been appropriated, but not yet been able to be spent for lack of rules. And one of the issues our district has is our representatives have asked for our board to come up with some sort of guidance or policy on how such conversion should happen. So to do that, our first goal, in the recommendations that are attached to the letter, the general principles, the majority of those were adopted at our April meeting, and they've just been restated here. But then the specific recommendations on siting was done after all this research and maps created that showed every existing social service, every supportive housing, every homeless shelter, and looked at how do we balance the need for more social service uses with the conversion of hotels, not to create an undue density and concentration of uses so they're successful in the end. The Clinton Health Kitchen Land Use Committee added certain items in. The Chelsea Land Use Committee added certain items in that was reconciled at the Executive Committee. We talked about it extensively. So this is really about over 2/3 of the board members have weighed in on this particular policy in the letter. After the general principles, there are 3 sections, one about homeless shelter conversions, one about supportive housing conversions, and the third about affordable housing conversions. On the homeless shelter conversions, we picked up on the 500-foot radius from the liquor licenses and said if there is already 150 beds or social service users in a 150-foot radius, that area, we would not wish to see any further social service use. We also talked about size of shelters between 50 and 100 beds, preferring those below 75 beds. We talked about they should include units for family households, not only singles, because there's a broader homeless population and demographic. Chelsea was very concerned there'd be a preference for veterans, and there always must be on-site social service support, resident space, office space, security space. For supportive housing conversions, we again use the same 500-foot rule, talked about a cumulative 150 beds in a 500-foot radius. There should only be one supportive housing site on one street or a street or avenue between 2 block fronts, again, to create less density, and that all supportive housing must include on-site social service, office space, resident common space. The model should be based upon the city's programs of 60% homeless and 40% community to encourage integration into the community. There should be also family households, not just singles. And more, the both committees talked about that any supportive housing should be part of a larger affordable housing development. So we are fully integrating individuals with deep social service need into the broad population. And then for affordable housing conversions, we stayed with the board's policy of a range of incomes from 50% of AMI to 165% of AMI. So it's a broad range, that there must be a mix of apartments, studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, 15% of any affordable housing development, which didn't include supportive, it should be for homeless housing as per the city's current guidelines. And there must be a 50% community preference. If there's a lottery, when there's a lottery, the developer or the operator should reach out and have educational sessions to help people navigate the lottery. This was a lot of discussion back and forth, and it really became down to something where we could balance. And we looked at, there's a whole series of maps attached, and those maps actually guide you, if you note, where it is very easy to have new social service use in places where there are many more than 150 beds, in some cases 200 or 300 beds in those different radii. So given that, open this up for discussion because I know there's going to be some.
You know, and what I'd like to add to that, thank you, Joe, for leading us through all that. I mean, the reasoning why this effort was undertaken is because we don't, as a district, want to have the same thing occur to us in the future that happened to us in the mid 30s, where the city is talking about plans of taking over distressed hotels and commercial office space. The state is talking about it. Real estate developers are eyeing hotels and looking at converting them. And what happened in the 30s was that there was no foresight, there was no planning of where these unsheltered neighbors would go and how they would fit into how they would integrate into the neighborhood. So what we're trying to do here is take a very proactive leadership role in setting some city and state policies on any of the acquisitions of distressed properties. So I just wanted to put it in that sort of framework for everybody to think through. If you look at the slide presentation in Dropbox, you'll see how the concentric circles overlap, and we envision different scenarios. If there's 150 beds, you can't put things in. If there's 75 beds, you can add some beds if the supporters. So you can layer in the 500-foot radius from the center of a supportive service location. That then helps drive what properties would or would not be eligible of distressed hotels or Class B, Class C office space. And the final thing I want to say is just a thank you to, I mean, Joe mentioned that probably 2/3 of this board has already seen this letter, but there's also a gang of about 20 people who, between Viren leading a data set charge in Savannah at Joe's office to get maps prepared, to Betty and Pam and Alan and all going out onto the streets and physically looking at buildings and saying, this one might work, this one might not work. And it was a great effort by so many people, and I want to thank everybody for all their hard work on this.
And last thing I want to mention, all the block associations added in Hell's Kitchen, surveying blocks, figuring out what to do and giving information. This was really a major community effort. So we're not just coming up with a policy that is a thought, but is based upon data and facts on the ground.
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that, that I think this is sort of the best of community cooperation and between the Hell's Kitchen, this Clinton Hell's Kitchen land use and Chelsea land use and others to produce this. And it was a real creative process, and particularly when you look at the radius and what you can do. And I think that we've created something that could be a model for other places for how you might cite or choose converted hotels and converted office spaces. So, and it was real education going out in the field and looking at every single building in a certain section of the neighborhood. So I think it's a good example. That's it.
Well, do you want me to call on people, or are you going to do it?
I've got it. Leslie was first.
Good.
I said this in the exec, but I'm just going to say it now. This is probably one of the best things that I have ever seen coming out of this community board as I've been on it. I think it is proactive. I think it's something that we're doing the job of electeds and the city, quite honestly. I think it is unbelievably detailed and thoughtful. And Joe, Paul, and also I'm on, the other groups that were working on it behind the scenes as well. It's unbelievable. And like Betty said, it should be a template for not only other community boards, I think, but I think just as a whole, it's very thoughtful. And the guys who put most of the work in, like, bravo, it's really amazing.
Blake?
Thank you. And I would echo Leslie's thoughts about this being just totally well-researched and really help, I think, prepare a fair set of guidelines here. My one question was around the temporary shelters, if it would make sense to add in the part about public process, the need for more visibility to timelines around those shelters. We're getting timelines for things like opening up to 100% and city workers going back. And, I think it would be beneficial to both the residents as well as the community to have more visibility to those timelines. And I think that does connect, I realize it's not the same thing as conversions, but, in order to make those decisions about permanent conversions, I think one would want to take into account what's going to happen with the temporary shelters.
Housing is going to come back next month with a very serious letter about that timeline. Maria and I have been working on this, and we're trying to engage. We've been engaged with DHS, and so far, Jesse, Maria, and I have been getting almost no answer. So we want to keep that for a separate focus letter because it's really a serious matter. It's as if DHS has never given any thought to when it's going to happen. It's bizarre, like.
Got it.
Wait,
Yes, thank you. The one word that comes to mind is phenomenal. I am absolutely thrilled about the concentric circles maps because I know in subcommittee we talked at length about how that is supposed to be envisioned and from a practical perspective how that would work out. My question actually just has to do with presentation. In looking at the letter, it mentions page 4 of the letter says there's one attachment and then 2 appendices. The first attachment says COVID residential conversions, which is the end of page 4. So beginning of page 5 has the title MBC for COVID residential conversions. Okay, that's fine. But then when you get to page 4 of the, I guess the attachments, it's at line 93 says attachments, attachment A again. So that could be a little bit confusing to a person picking up this packet.
We have to fix the references. Got it, Tweet. Thank you.
Okay.
anyone else? All right. We have one item of new business coming out of transportation, going back to Dale.
Yes, sorry about that, because it was a little bit of confusion. We thought this was voted out, and it turns out, having reviewed the tape, it wasn't. This is a letter to our electeds, and in particular to the chair of the Transportation Committee, to request that they seek to retroactively apply zoning text amendment from 2013, which implemented safety measures for parking garages and required them to do simple things like stop signs and speed bumps. And basically older garages were grandfathered out of having to meet the requirements, and it only applied to newer garage constructions. So as we saw related with the unfortunate pedestrian fatality of a resident of Community Board 4, a woman who was 73 years old, walking on the sidewalk, a woman who worked as a librarian at the New York Public Library, or an archivist rather, that garage could have been retroactively fitted with these changes had the law applied to such a garage, but it doesn't. So this letter requests of our electeds to change the law so that it retroactively applies, and it's not a impractical solution. These are fairly easy remediations.
Any questions? All right. That's it for the business session. I'm going to turn this now over to Mike and Leslie for a roll call vote.
Can I, Lowell, can I just jump in there real quickly?
Of course.
I apologize, and I apologize for the confusion regarding item 17. If we can just do, if everybody who has not voted already, I hope we haven't, but can we just everybody do withdrawn and not tabled? It would just make it simpler, and it's actually more appropriate to what's being done at this point.
Okay. Jesse, what are we calling the new item?
The new item should be in your vote sheet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just not, it's item 26.
And what's withdrawn again?
Item 17 is withdrawn.
Thank you.
I have a dumb question. Where's the vote sheet?
It's been sent to you in your email.
Oh. While the meeting was on or before?
Before.
Okay.
If you search for vote sheet in your email, it should pop up. I sent it today.
At a 127, if that helps.
Thank you, Twee.
Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay. Let's start with Sarah Appleton.
She is excused today.
Okay. Christine? She here?
She is absent.
Uh-huh. Gwen Billage. I think I saw Gwen.
I'm here.
How are you voting, Gwen?
Yes.
Yes to all. Good.
Except the ones that aren't, we're not voting on.
Okay. Leslie,
Yes to all.
Viren,
Yes to all.
Jessica Chase,
Yes to all.
Dale,
Yes to all.
Judith,
Okay, I abstain on number 3 and yes to all the rest.
okay. Martin Ducat,
Yes to all.
Paul Devlin,
Yes to all.
Tina,
Yes to all.
Pete Diaz,
Yes to all.
Brett Furfer. Brett, is Brett here?
He left.
Okay. Elzora, are you here? I don't see her.
I do not see her. She's not on the panel.
Okay. Wendy Gonzalez. Wendy?
Wendy is here.
Let us see. We've got time. We'll give everybody a chance to get to their mics. Wendy Gonzalez, what say you?
We don't hear you, Wendy. I see you, but we don't hear you.
Just raise your hand, Wendy.
If it's yes to all, just nod your head. If it's more complicated, it's not. Okay. Let's keep on working on it. We'll get back to you. Let's circle back to Wendy.
All right. David Holoka.
Yes to all.
Frank.
Yes to all.
Josephine.
Yes to all.
Carrie Keenan.
Yes to all.
Blake.
Yes to all.
Bert.
Yes to all.
Chris.
Yes to all.
Okay. Jeffrey.
I am present, not eligible on number 21. Aye on all the rest.
Okay. Betty.
Yes to all.
Sarah Mills. Is Sarah here?
I didn't see Sarah tonight, but
No, I didn't see Sarah tonight either.
Okay. Me, yes to all. JD.
Yes to all.
Maria.
Yes to all.
Alan Oster.
Yes, sir. To all.
Brad Pascarella, is he here?
Yes to all.
Okay. Rhonda is not. Twee.
Yes to all.
Joe.
Yes to all.
Sabrina.
Yes to all.
Dolores.
Yes to all.
Brian Sokow. I don't think he's here. David Solnick.
Yes to all.
Katie Stokes.
Abstaining on item 25, yes to the rest.
Okay, Kit.
Yes to all.
Marty Treat.
Yeah. Oh.
Thank you, Hector.
Yes to all.
Rob Walker.
Yay to all.
Let's see what James Wallace has to say tonight.
May the fourth be with you and Feliz Cinco de Mayo. Yes to all.
Very good. David Warren.
Yay to all.
Leslie Williams.
Yes to all.
Colin Wright. Don't see him.
I don't see him either.
Okay, Bert Lazarin. We got Bert, right?
Want me to vote twice, I will.
Okay, yep, that would be good.
Yes to all.
How about Lowell?
Yes to all.
And back to Wendy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Woohoo. I'm yes to all except 16. I'm present, not eligible.
Oh, good. I think that's it then.
Can you repeat the instructions on 17, please?
Sure. Just put everybody should put withdrawn, please.
Withdrawn? Okay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I have a question if there's time.
Yep.
Just a brief bit of new business. I would like for it to percolate in people's minds
that as we are very quickly getting to the point where meetings will be in person again, and although I'm very much looking forward to seeing everyone in person, these Zoom meetings have allowed people with disabilities, maybe people who are elderly, people who have jobs, people who have families, to attend in numbers that I've never seen in our in-person meetings. And I just wanted to pitch it out there that maybe our board could lead the way in, suggesting that 1 or 2 meetings a year be Zoom meetings to increase accessibility to the community. I just thought maybe it's something worth discussing. I'm not saying that, maybe the community doesn't want to do that. I don't know. But I wanted to put that out there as a potential agenda item.
Well, how about
December.
hybrid meetings? Have there been any discussions about hybrid meetings? I mean, other places, even industries are doing it, businesses do it. Everybody's thinking about hybrid meetings from now on.
Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here. We have not been instructed to go back to live meetings yet. When that happens, it is my inclination to maintain some kind of streaming presence as well. But, it's going to depend upon what resources we get from the Borough President's office as well. So I appreciate where this is coming from, James. I agree with you and your instincts that we increase participation by streaming, but it's a little premature to start addressing yet. Okay.
Sure. I think having a conversation now will allow us to help shape the conversation rather than just react when meetings are public again. It's something
I agree with James. The proactive nature. I agree with James.
I agree with both of them.
All right.
Let's plant the seed where we can.
All right. Well, then it'll be taken up by exec at the next executive committee meeting, and we can discuss it and bring it back around then.
Good.
Joe, go ahead.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Third.
Without any objection from anyone else, we're done here. Thank you.
Bye to Judith and Martin.
Thank you.
Bye, Judith.
Thank you, everybody.
Call me.
Bye.
Bye.
I love you.
Get some new blood.
Have a good night.
Good night.